Hey, I am Joe Mullican, and this is Life Mentor, the podcast where we provide the time, the space, the opportunity for people to share stories of difficulties, of excitements, of jumping points, of disappointments, messy middles, of their lives and the way that it was impacted by those that they fed into and those that fed into them. And this week we have Kathy Van Benthuysen on, and she was a 30-year teacher. She now works for and runs an organization called Conversation that provides the opportunity for parents to learn more about the technology and social media and the impact that it has on their kids. And I'm really excited for this episode because during this time together, she gets to share a lot of the story of her time as an educator. Something that I'm passionate about is someone who's been in education for the vast majority of my career. But one of the things that I love during this time is that so much of what she shares about, I think, are things that so many of us experience, whether we're in education or in any other industry. And there's so much carryover and so much connection between the work that she did and the work that we do. And the times when maybe we're sitting in a spot where we feel stuck in our careers, where we feel like we're in a place that our heart really is, but what's going on around us might not be aligned with what's going on. And again, we've been sold this lie that our stories don't matter, and we've been told that we don't have a space to share them unless they are the most grandiose, and we know that we are the loneliest generation that exists. And so I hope that you take as much away during this time with Kathy as I did. I know that I thoroughly loved it and enjoyed being able to spend time with her. So with that, I'm so excited for Kathy and for you to be able to enjoy this time with her as well. I hope that you've enjoyed the first couple of episodes and can't wait for us to continue to provide this platform, this space, and these opportunities to make everybody feel maybe just a little bit less lonely, and for everybody to remember just a little bit more that their story matters. Joe Mullican, this is Life Mentored. Excited for you to listen to this time with Kathy. Well, hey, Kathy, I am so excited that you were willing to jump on. Thank you so much. I know that I had the honor of, being able to be on, your video series and your, video podcast with Conversation going through Anxious Generation. And, it's interesting. At the time I was doing consulting work, had been in education. Now at this moment, I'm, right back in the classroom again. And interestingly, watching some of the things that we talked about in Anxious Generation happen in real time with real kids. But I'm so excited to have you on. I know you've spent years in education, but I know you've spent years doing a wide array of really incredible things. But even more so, one of the things that, I think I've found to be so incredible is, in such a short time, seeing your heart, seeing how caring, how loving, how genuine you are as a person has been really pretty incredible to me. And so I'm excited for us just to kind of get to chat today and for people to get to know a little bit about you and hear your story.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah. So, if you want, give us just a little bit, quick, Kathy, of who you are, and then we'll kind of jump into a little bit about your story from there.
Okay, so I am Kathy Van Benthuysen. I always say I used to have a really short last name. Used to be Murphy, and no one ever spelled it wrong or said it wrong, and then got married. Now I have a super long last name that most people say wrong. Actually, you didn't. I was impressed, Joe, that you said it correctly. And I remember when I got married, my aunt said to me, "Are you going to hyphenate your name?" And I said, "My gosh, if we have kids, they'll never get out of kindergarten with a hyphenated name, Murphy Van Benthuysen." So, and I taught for 30 years. It was something that I knew when I was 5 years old. I wanted to be a teacher, and I got to fulfill that dream. And when I retired, I came to Conversation, and that's where I am at today. And I have been with my husband for 26 years now. He is the most amazing man. And we have two kids, a 21-year-old and a 17-year-old. And we're so blessed.
That's awesome. And I will say, I got lots of practice listening to you say your last name, um, and practiced after actually going back and watching a video quick of you saying it before we came on today to make sure like I'm not gonna mess this one up. Because I remember like my name's not that hard with Mulligan, but it always got me when people misspelled my name when they emailed me in like Mr. Mulligan but you have to spell it right to email me. And I'm like, how do you have to spell it right to email me and then misspell it when you like write it out? It doesn't make sense to me. So yeah, mine, I was just leaning to the when I get to play golf, Mulligan. They're like Mulligan, and I'm like, well, I was close enough to that at one point. So yeah, it's a birthright. I can have as many as I want, and interestingly, like now that we're into the podcast and rolling and stuff, that's kind of what Life Mentored is all about, right? Is mulligans, is
Yeah.
the fact that while it's not a do-over, it's the fact that we're not really presented with one path and one step in life, and we get opportunities, and so um, I'd love, Kathy, I know you have a story. I know you have something um, that is your kind of journey and path. And again, the whole focus of what we do is that, uh, and this is that we're the loneliest generation. I know we talked about on ours before, the anxious
Mhm.
generation, and I think that adds to that loneliness factor as well. But we've been told don't share your stories; they don't matter, or they don't unless you're famous or it's grandiose or it's, um, and they do. And, I know that and you sharing your story in our conversation today, that someone's gonna listen, they're gonna hear something and resonate for the first time, resonate again, and hear something that you share and go like, "I'm not alone." And at the end of the day, like, that's, I know you've heard me say it before, but that's really my heart, is that I want people to know that they belong, that they're not alone, and that they have a place, and they deserve to have that place. So, um, at this point, I'm gonna kinda turn it over to you and let you share, because this is as much, about me being able to listen and learn, and find joy in your journey, as much as it is for anyone else to hear it, and for you, to deserve and to have the, not the honor, but the, opportunity and the space to share your story, which is wildly deserving of being shared and having that space for.
So I'm going to start when I was 5. I'm not going to take you year by year through my childhood, but I remember. So I have 4 siblings, 2 older, 2 younger. I am the middle child, and yes, I actually do love being the middle child. Um, and I remember I used to make them come downstairs, and we would play school. And I would teach them whatever lessons on my little blackboard, and then I would give them homework, and I did give them recess. I'm not a monster. I let them have stack, and we would play school, and I knew from that young of an age that it was always something I wanted to do. I always wanted to be a teacher. And it's kind of funny because my siblings have started in one path and then gone to another, and I was the one that knew from, a very young age and then continued on it for 30 years. And I remember my first year teaching, and I love sharing this story. I was actually fired the day before school started. And I remember that they called me up and said, "Hey, Kathy, we wanted to know if you wanted to take this 4th grade position at this school." And I said, "Well, you know what? I have so many other options." I didn't. I'm joking. But I thought, "Oh my gosh, the day before school started, what's going on?" And I went in, and I had amazing mentors. Judy and Debbie were teaching 4th grade at the time, And the reason they hired me was because they were going to have 28 kids in a class. And we have a law in New Jersey that once you hit 28, you have to have a para. And the school thought, well, why don't we just, instead of hiring two paras, why don't we just hire another teacher? So they hired me and I started. I remember my first year teaching. If I didn't know something, I would just say, oh, it's my first year teaching. Well, actually, I just started the day before school started. So, and I was never worried about not knowing an answer. But one of the things that I didn't know, and I learned very quickly, that you're not the kid's friend. You are the adult in the classroom. You are their teacher. You are their guide, but you're not their friend. And my first 2 years were a little challenging. I don't think the kids realized it, but I knew something wasn't right. And there was an incident that somebody pushed a kid. And it was, Joe, at that moment, I realized, oh my gosh. And I said to the kid, what are you doing? Why would you push someone? And it was in that moment that I realized that I can't be their friend. I need to draw the line and I need to be their teacher and not their friend. And it really changed. It changed the whole dynamic of the classroom. It changed how they interacted with me and they even changed how they interacted with each other. And then I spent 30 years in the same school. I did move classrooms, but I stayed the same grade. I was fourth grade for 30 years. And I went to my principal one time and I said, "Listen, I'm more than happy to move grade levels if you want me to." And he said, "Do me a favor. Stop saying that. You're in a testing grade and you do a great job with the kids. So I want to keep you in fourth grade." And people would always say to me, "Oh, weren't you bored? Weren't you bored teaching fourth grade for 30 years?" Joe, no. I can honestly say not once because, they keep giving you different curriculums, but you have new kids. Every,
Yeah.
they say it's 9 months of school, it's really 10. Every 10 months, I'm getting a new set of kids. And I just I would say to them every day, "You have no idea how blessed I am to wake up every day and to come here and to be your teacher." And that was truly, truly my heart in everything that I did in the classroom, is that I really saw it as a blessing. And I would tell the kids all the time that I would just be standing there and I'd be like, "Hey, have I told you lately that I love you guys?" And they're like sitting up straighter and happier. And it was a wonderful, wonderful 30 years of my life. I look back and I've been retired. I actually retired 5 years early, and I can tell that story later if you want. But I retired 5 years early and I still can't believe that that 30 years went like that. And I look and I would say to the kids, I had these signs on the wall, and I had one that said the same thing in three different places. And it said, "Speak softly." And I would say to the kids, I have something in the classroom on the first day of school. I have something in the classroom that's up here three times. Can anyone figure out what it is? And they're looking around. Oh, it says "speak softly." And I said, why do you think I would have that there? And I said, it's not because I forgot that I put it up two other times. And they
Right, right, right.
and they said, "Well, it must be important to you." And I said, "It is." I said, I will never raise my voice to you. I will never yell at you. And, I said, my husband and children, we don't raise our voices to each other. We don't yell. I said, if you want to go ask them, you can, and we would laugh about it. But to me, that was just about respect, that I don't need to. I'm an adult. Like, could I have yelled? Could I have raised my voice? Yeah, of course I could have. But that's not, it's just, this wasn't my personality. And the kids would say, they would say, "Oh, you know what's our favorite thing about you? Is that you never yell and that you pray for us." And that was something that I did every day for every kid in my class, was pray for them. And they would say, well, what do you pray about? And I was like, oh, that's not for you to
If you
know.
only knew. Yeah.
Yeah, I said, but what I love is I love to see the answer to prayer, and I love to see God working in your life. And um, people would say, oh, well, how do you get away saying you're going to pray for them? And I would always say, I have never in my entire life ever met someone to say to me, don't pray for me. Never, never. And so when I would tell parents,
Yeah.
I'm praying for you. I'm praying for your kids. They would every single person across the board would say, we appreciate it. Thank you. And so when
Yeah.
teachers people would say, how do you get away with it? I'm like, get away with what? I'm praying for someone. That's not a bad thing. And one of the I had this thing that I would say to the kids all the time. I discipline you because I love you, because I care how you turn out one day. And there was never tears. So when I did discipline the kids, it wasn't like I didn't do anything. I just, you have to take away stars, or you might have to miss part of an activity until you finish your work or whatever it was. And there was no tears because they knew that the discipline was because I loved them, not because I was being mean.
Yeah.
And I look back over my career, and I'll say it again, I was so blessed to be able to do what I did.
Yeah. Well, one, thank you. I think that, especially right now and education, that's not always the norm. Um, I can say that I'm guilty at times of raising my voice now. I wouldn't say that I'm yelling or shouting or, sometimes I'm in a junior high and the volume level to be above it, you have to be a little louder than everybody else. But, I certainly resonate with the fact that like ultimately we want to be there because we love kids. What, I think you talked about a couple things in there that, I'd love to kind of, hear more about because I know you talked about your siblings changing jobs. I know you've talked about, um, how you really stayed in it, and I can even say like, I love being in education, but I've, moved in and out at different times. And I think that we're in a society right now, largely where people are, you know, kind of more trained at their work.
Yeah.
Um, what do you think were some of the things for you that really, were kind of those components that made it so that through those 30 years you kept wanting to show up, you kept wanting to be in that spot? Also, like, kudos to your principal for moving you rooms in the same building, because as a former elementary principal, I had a teacher who was teaching and had been in the same room, was actually in her mom's room, and I was like, not touching that room. I'll move everybody else in the building, but I am not moving her. But uh what do you think some of those things were for you?
I think I think a part of it was I had always that, even at 5 when I said, "Oh, I wanna be a teacher," it was always about helping people. Like, that was always how I saw of it. "Oh, well, how can I help others?" But it's funny, when I actually got into teaching, I realized that they made a difference in my life as much as I made a difference in theirs. And when you think about education, okay, I'm the teacher, I'm going in, I'm gonna teach you things. But I learned actually how to be a better parent by teaching, and be it by teaching, I know I became a better parent. Because you ever hear those stories when someone's, they have a little baby and they're telling a story about, their toddler, and they'll say, you're not going to believe it. It happened in a split second. They got the box of Cheetos and threw it all over the floor. And I used to think before having kids, uh-huh, okay, they just weren't paying attention.
Yeah,
And then when
right.
I had kids one day, I was like, oh, wait, they really are that fast. They really do that.
Right.
And I think with teaching, I thought, oh, well, it's just the teacher is just having, they're the one with a problem. That's why they're not getting along with the kids, or and I never realized it until you get in and you start teaching that I loved all my kids. I'm gonna be honest, some of them I loved more than others. That doesn't make it good or bad. It's just you love some of them more. But I think that was the thing that, and this is something that I actually did pray every day with some of those challenging kids. I would always just say, Lord, give me your eyes for them. Let me see them through your heart, because I don't want to be aggravated with them. Because you know what? They already have that. They get that at home probably with their parents, or their parents are
Hmm.
like, "Oh my gosh, I can't deal with them. Thank goodness they get to spend 7 hours a day with you." I didn't want to give them the same thing that maybe their parents are frustrated or aggravated or whatever. And I thought I want to be slightly different. So when I actually started teaching and in the classroom, I realized that, that you don't just show up and everything just magically happens. There's a lot of work that goes into making sure that a classroom runs smoothly. And when I was, when I became a parent, I realized that these kids that I'm teaching are someone's baby. These kids are someone's most prized and precious possession, and I wanna do right by them, and becoming a parent made me realize to a deeper level of my commitment to making sure that it wasn't just about the academics. As I would tell the parents at back to school night every year, they don't care how much I know until they know how much I care, and that was, like our relationship, because I don't have to yell and scream to get you to do what I want. I'm going to love you, and you don't want to disappoint me, because we have a great relationship.
Yeah.
And when having kids really showed me that I want to make sure that when they left at the end of the day, that they knew they were safe, they knew they were cared for, and they knew they were loved. And I know that they did.
Yeah.
So,
And that's, I can remember being a principal, and there were so many times when I had to, call home or do that, and then, even not like, there's so many times where I'm like, it it does. That's almost harder. And then it's not having to talk to the parents or do that. It's I like, my heart goes out for them, because it's like, man, like, I know that like there's no such thing as a bad kid, right? And um again, I think same thing that you said, like when I went into teaching and went into that, I learned so much more from them than I think they probably ever learned from me. Um, and but it's that, like, your heart kind of goes out, and I never laid awake at night because I was worried about what I was going to teach. I laid awake at night because I was worried about the kid who was working 30 hours a week after school at the BP station, because the deal with mom and dad, or mom and her boyfriend, was that they paid for rent and he paid for the utilities, and it was cold.
mm,
And so he's having, like, and so, like, my heart would go out to him. My heart would be there for the kid who, I knew was struggling, for the kid who like, that was what it was. It was always the wrestle of, like, how do I hook him? How do I get them in? How do I get them to see greater in themselves? How do I get them? Um, but I think there's, I'm sure you had challenging years, like every teacher has. And, I think one of the most commendable things about it that I see in you, Kathy, too, is that it's not just that, you went in as a great teacher. You embody that. And you probably did as a kid too. I didn't quite embody some of the things that I may embody now, as a kid. Some of my teachers were very surprised when I became a teacher. But I I know that you've embodied that since teaching. And so, what what do you think, I know that the kids taught you. If you were talking to someone now, though, that's in a position where they're like, this is my passion. And I think, I always hesitate to call things our calling, um, because I think sometimes for people, then it makes them feel like they failed if they transition or move. And I think especially like if you're in a position of ministry or a position teaching, those are the places where people go like, was my calling? I failed at it. And now my life's meaningless. And I'm like, well, maybe it's teaching in a different way, but like you embody the I care, I love, I am praying for you. I am, and I can testify and preach to that because I get your message or I get your, which I can't, you know, uh, um, communicate my gratefulness and my gratitude for enough. But like for people who are in those places where, right now where they feel like, man, like I feel like this is where my heart is. This is where but I feel like I'm trudging through. Like in those times, what were the things that allowed you to continue like kind of pushing or pulling, or what would you share with some of those people?
I think I mean, everything isn't, rainbows
Yeah.
and cupcakes and unicorns, and there's going to be those times where you kinda question, "Why am I doing what I'm doing?" And, uh, for me, there's a couple things. One is my faith. I would, pray about it, and, it's nice having a husband who gets it. He's not in the education field, but someone who I knew I could talk to him about stuff and be a sounding board. And sometimes he would just say, "Kef, just pray about it. Like, you can't complain about it. It's not gonna complain. It's not gonna change it. Just pray about it." Um, and then for me, when there were years when, there's some more challenging situations and students and parents even. And then for me, I would look back. So why am I doing this? Why did I get into being a teacher? And what's my purpose here? And that's what I would always come back to is, what, this too shall pass. This might not be the greatest whatever season, a couple of months or whatever the situation is, but I know why I'm here. And it's one of those things too that you can't let one, two, or even, five kids ruin it for everyone else. That I mean, there was there was one year, and I think I told this story just recently. Um, we were we I would take them outside to play kickball every once in a while, and I had told them in the morning, "Hey, if we get all our work done, I'm gonna take you guys outside to play kickball." And Joe, it was one of those times, it was almost like opposite day, and they're like, "Let's just do nothing and still go outside and play kickball." I'm like, "Okay." And I was never one of those punish the whole class for one person being bad, but I
Right.
also didn't wanna punish the 3 people who were being good as opposed to the 18 that were not doing what they were supposed to be doing. So, it took us a while, it took us longer than we would need it to. But they finally finished their work, and I said, "Okay, we're gonna go outside." So, I know, and I can just imagine in the mind of the 18 that were really struggling to get it together and finish their work, they're probably like, "Yes, we still get to go outside." So, we walked outside, and I said, "Oh, wait, hang on a second. I just want everyone to stand up against the wall for a minute," and I named 3 people who were just angels all day, and I said, "Oh, you guys can go play in the playground, go ahead." And everyone else was, "Wait, wait, what are we doing?" I said, "Oh." I said, you guys remember when we talked about, getting our work done and doing what we're supposed to be doing?" And I said, "You made a choice." And I said, "Remember how I always say, I discipline you because I love you. You can't just do whatever you want. I don't have time to give individual invitations. Joe, I need you to get your work done. Kathy, I need you to I need you guys to do what I ask you to do when I ask you to. So for right now, you took away a lot of time." I said, "So now you're just going to stand here. I just want you to contemplate, what could you do differently next time? When I ask you to do what I need you to do, what could you do differently? I just want you to stand there. Don't talk to each other. Just think about it." So while they're standing there, the resource officer walks outside And he looks and he sees 3 kids running around on the playground, and he sees 18 lined up against the wall. And he goes, "Are you gonna play dodgeball with them?" And I was like, "You gonna start pegging them with balls?" And I was like, "No." I said, "You know what? Ask them why they're standing there." So he turns and he says, "So what happened?" And someone said, "Oh, well, we really weren't listening today and blah, blah, blah." So he goes, "Okay." And he goes, "So this is very interesting." And I go, "No, no, no. Now you have to ask them why they have to stand there. Like, what's my reason?" Joe, almost in unison, 18 kids all said to him, "She disciplines us because she loves us and she cares how we turn out one day." And he looked at me and I said, "I do." And then
Yeah.
he and I just chit-chatted for a little bit, and I said to them, I said, "All right, well, anyone can tell me what are you going to do differently next time?" And Kevin goes like, "Oh, we're gonna get to work right away, blah, blah, blah." And then they went off and played. But it's funny when I saw the resource officer again, he's like, "Do you remember when you had all the kids against the—" I said, "I don't know, it did make more of an impact on you than it did to those 18." But that is for me when I think about teaching, it's those moments when you think, "Oh my gosh." I had seen a kid recently, and there was something that, occurred, and I had to discipline him, and he said to me, he's like in his 20s now, and he said, "Oh, do you remember when this happened?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, I do." And he said, "You were right to not let me," whatever the discipline was. And he goes, "Thank you for that." I'm like, "Well, I'm glad that you remembered it, and I hope that you whatever it was, you didn't do it again." And he just started laughing. Can I tell you, like, I don't even remember the time that it happened, but he did.
Yeah. And that's I talked to a former student the other day, and he had said something to me about what I had said, to class and to them one day, and I was like, "You sure that was me?" I was like, okay." But it was, something about, like, don't ever settle for, a life that you don't wanna have, and don't,
Yeah.
don't say, but it was he said it was like gave him courage to switch majors and but
Oh,
I just was like, "You sure it was me?" And not somebody else. Was like, "Cool." But again, I think it's yeah, everything you just shared, I think is so cool because I think we often think of teaching being so disconnected from everything else in life and in business or anything like that. But like those same traits of what you did in class are the same things for leadership. Those same traits are the same things that are what get us through tough times. The same things are the for parents that struggle disciplining their kids or being stuck kind of in that spot. I've got two
mhm.
girls. I hate those moments where one of them is kind of being a little bit of a jerk and the other one's not, and it's like, well, I said we could go do this, but now do we go? And it's the same with class where it's like, even in some of the classes I had, I've got kids who are acting out and kids who aren't, and you feel bad for the ones who aren't, but you don't necessarily want to give in to the ones who are. And so it just is that, there's that balance there that you try to navigate. And, I think there's nothing more demoralizing for a culture anywhere, whether it's in business, whether it's in a home, whether it's in a church, whether it's in a school, whether it's in a country, whatever it is, than poor behavior being allowed to exist
Yes.
without accountability and good
Yeah.
behavior existing without reward. And, um, I think that oftentimes, I know at least for me, when I've been stuck in those like the muddy spots and the grind through, like I've reminded myself the same thing of kind of like, this is my purpose. This is what, you know, um, and there's been times, again, like you said, that I've questioned whether that's what I should be doing. There's been times where you know, even recently, like where I'm like, am I crazy right now? Um, transitioning from consulting back into the classroom and changes with education and concerns around all that stuff. But I think one of the most beautiful things and one of the things that I know that I'm going to take away and continue to think about with this is that idea too, though, that you I know that you show up as you, and that I can just imagine you back as a teacher, um, and picture you in the classroom. And I was a pre-K 2 principal, and didn't get up to fourth grade, so I would have stolen you down to my building. That would have made you change grade levels. But I think it was one of those things for me, though, as you were sharing that I can imagine you in a position taking what you're getting from kids. And I'll never forget someone telling me, I asked a question of a teacher at one point, hey, what would you need to get from kids today that would change what you do tomorrow? And they said, nothing. I've been doing this. I know what they need tomorrow. And in my head, I immediately, as a principal with a first year staff in the district, went like, oh, something big's going to have to change, or I don't know that I'm going to keep you. Because that attitude and mindset is antithetical to what I want to build here and what I think is right for kids. Um, and that's the opposite of what you are. And I'm sure what you showed up as a teacher. And I know for me, that idea of just kind of going back to, and I had the conversation with my daughter, like, she was like, well, I don't know if I want to be an author anymore. They don't make money. And I'm like, first of all, you're 9. Like, you, your dad's 38. Like, I don't know what I want to be when I grew up. So I think you're probably okay. Um, but instead of just like, I want to be this when I grew up, like, this is what makes me feel whole.
Yeah.
And what I think is beautiful is like, you found that early, right?
Yeah.
Teaching was what made you feel whole. But I think so many times people retire and go do other things, and they just don't know where it is. But you've remained whole, um, and leaned into who you are, especially with conversation too, and continuing to grow and support people. And um, I know for me, that's like that'll be something that I continue to think about is, when there are those times of like, should I be doing this? Should I have kind of going back and going like, why did I want to in the first
Mhm.
place? Because that's what we forget about sometimes too, right? When things get hard, is like, well, why do I want to come in the first place? Why do I want to, do this in the beginning? And see so often that compassion fatigue, whether it's in teaching or, we know it, I know it every year, October, because parent teacher conferences hit, and it's in February and the beginning of March. Like, we know what it is. We know what compassion fatigue is. But the fact that compassion fatigue didn't hit for 30 years and still continues now, and even in marriages, and, as a parent, as friends, as all of that, being able to kind of weather that storm and go, I'm going to lean into my faith. I'm going to lean into my core values. I'm going to lean
Mhm.
into who I am. And that's what's going to be the thing that kind of drives me through. And um, I think is pretty incredible. So one, like, I wish I had incredible teachers, to be clear. But I wish I would have been able to work with you as an educator, and still learn from you now. And but uh, as we kind of wrap up, if you could share anything with anyone right now who is going through some of that potential, like, messy middle. And the beautiful part of this is that, messy middles don't always have to be sad.
Yeah.
There's still joy that exists within them. But if you could kind of share anything with someone who's doing that, like, your kind of closing thoughts, or words, what would you share with them to try and give them, some hope as they continue to
Mhm.
move?
I would say, um, try to find the little moments of joy each day, and there are many, and sometimes we might overlook them. One of the things that I did every day of my career was I would greet the kids at the door, and I would say, "Good morning, Joe. How are you?" And I would expect, eye contact and a response. And when you would say to me, "Oh, I'm doing well," and then I got them to start asking me how I was doing, and I would say, "Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for asking." And then I would say something. You are loved. You make me smile. You're worthy. You matter. And every day
Yeah.
I would say something different. I actually had I love sticky notes, by the way. I had sticky notes, and
They're the
I
best.
had 180 phrases like that in sticky notes inside my grade book. And I would just go in and I'd be like, "Oh, okay, this is what I'm saying today." And I would say, "Good morning, Joe. How are you?" "I'm great. Thanks for asking." And you matter. And Joe, I would see kids and they're all waiting in line. No one could come in the door until I greeted them at the door. And I could see kids stand up straighter and feel, oh my gosh. And then they would love it because I never did the same word twice. I mean, I had 180 words written down. And it was
Yeah.
something that we did every single day. And at the end of the day, they would have to come and say goodbye to me. I know most teachers stood in the doorway. I didn't because I wanted them to purposely come over and say goodbye. Because sometimes you just, oh yeah, yeah, and you just walk out the door and you're really not having that connection. But when they have to come, and we would always fist bump each other. And I said, if you want to hug me, you can. Like that would be the last day of school. We'd be like, okay, we're gonna hug, and we're all crying. But we would always fist bump each other. And the reason that I wanted them to come say goodbye to me is because I wanted them to know that no matter what happened during the day, we're good. I want you to go home. I want you to have an amazing evening, and tomorrow starts a new day. So we would always fist each other like, yeah, have a great day, have a great afternoon, fist bump each other and leave. And so I would say find the little things, even if it's a greeting in the morning and a goodbye in the afternoon. Find the little things that bring you joy.
I love that. And I know we were actually on meeting not too long ago, connecting, and loved doing the affirmations. You guys pulled two up for me and it was awesome. And I used to tell my teachers I'll never forget the moment when I was out sick with COVID. I always told my teachers, like, you are, like, you're appreciated, you're loved, and you are enough. And when I came back, they had shirts on, and when they came out and they brought a sign to put in my yard, it said, "This principal is loved, this
Aw.
principal is appreciated, this principal is enough." And like those are those little moments that you kind of never
Yeah.
forget, right? And but Kathy, I hope you are more than enough, and are loved, and I know that there are going to be people who listen to this, whether they're in education or they're in other industries, who listen to it and resonate and feel like maybe that they're enough in this moment right now as they move through things. So if people want to reach out to you, I know we'll put some information kind of in the show notes and that, but if people want to reach out to you or connect, where are places that they can kind of find out more about you or connect with you?
Well, to connect with me, you can email me at Kathy with a K at conversation.com. And I am on Facebook and Instagram under Conversation, but on LinkedIn, I am under Kathy Van Benthuysen. And you could connect with me there also.
Awesome. And one of the things I love about you and everybody else who's been on and going on is that I do know that there are people who have that same belief and mindset that there's enough room at the table for everybody, and that we truly want to build a community and show that. So I know that if someone does reach out, I know that you're the person who also responds and connects with people and does that. So I just want to thank you for coming on, sharing your story, the amazing things that you did in the classroom. It is I think people forget that teaching is maybe the ultimate instance of delayed gratification, because sometimes it takes a decade to see some of the results of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Sometimes it comes sooner, but I know you made a profound impact on kids. It's evident of that with having kids come back and talk to you years later. And I love to continue to see what you do, but I just want to thank you for coming and sharing your story and being willing to spend some time with me. And I can't wait to continue to see the amazing things that you do, and to continue just to be friends with you as we move forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Joe. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Well, I hope you have a wonderful week, and for everybody that's watching, that's listening, again, this is our time where people get to come and share stories of, that everyday life for everyday people, to be able to feel a little bit less alone in this world, to feel a little bit more like each of our stories matter, no matter what we've done, no matter where we're at, and no matter what we do, because like Kathy, like you just said, we are enough, and we are loved, and we are appreciated, and we are worthy of having this time, this space to have our stories shared. So loved having you on, love this time, and looking forward to stories as we move in the future. So thank you for joining me. For everyone who listened, thank you for joining us. Love spending time with Kathy. I'm Joe Mulliken, and this is Life Mentored.